Daxton Calloway stood frozen in the dimly lit hotel suite, his breath shallow as he stared at the lifeless body of his wife, Selina Vexley. Just hours ago, she had been his beautiful bride, twirling in a white gown, her laughter filling the air. Now she lay crumpled on the blood-stained carpet, her once bright eyes vacant. The wedding night that was supposed to mark the beginning of their forever had instead ended in horror. And Daxton, his hands still trembling from the fury that had overtaken him, knew there was no turning back. Selina Mares stood in front of the grand mirror in her bridal suite, her white gown shimmering under the soft golden lights. The delicate lace trailed behind her, each intricate detail a testament to the months of careful planning she had put into this day. She had always imagined this moment, the day she would walk down the aisle and begin a new chapter with the man she loved. The scent of fresh roses filled the room, mingling with the gentle hum of classical music playing in the background. Her heart pounded with excitement as she ran her fingers over the veil, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. Outside, guests gathered in the lavish garden of the estate, their murmurs filled with anticipation. Rows of white chairs lined the pathway leading to an elegantly decorated archway, adorned with cascading flowers in shades of blush and ivory. The sun cast a golden glow over the scene, making everything feel like a dream. Selina took a deep breath, steadying herself as she listened to the distant sounds of laughter and conversation. Daxton Calloway waited at the altar, dressed in a tailored black suit that only added to his commanding presence. He was a man of discipline, raised in a family that valued traditions and honor above all else. His name carried weight in the business world, and his future had always been meticulously planned. Today was no different. Marrying Selina was the final piece in the life he had carefully constructed for himself. She was beautiful, graceful, and everything he believed a wife should be. His lips curled into a small smile as he glanced at the expectant faces of their guests. But beneath his composed exterior, a storm brewed, one that no one could see. The ceremony began with soft music playing as Selina stepped onto the aisle. Her arm looped through her father's. The world around her faded as she locked eyes with Daxton, her stomach twisting in nervous excitement. Each step forward felt surreal, as if she were floating toward her future. Guests watched in admiration, whispering about how perfect they looked together. The vows were exchanged under the golden evening sky, every word spoken with the promise of forever. When Daxton slid the ring onto Selina's finger, she felt her chest tighten with overwhelming emotion. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss against her lips, sealing their union with an unspoken promise. The crowd erupted into applause, and just like that, they were husband and wife. As the night unfolded, the reception buzzed with joy. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom, their glow reflecting off the polished floors. Tables were adorned with fine china, flickering candles, and glasses filled with the finest champagne. The air was filled with laughter as guests shared stories, toasted to the newlyweds, and danced under the glittering lights. Selina and Daxton swayed to their first dance, her head resting against his chest as the music wrapped around them. Everything felt perfect, like a fairy tale coming to life. She couldn't stop smiling, unaware that in just a few hours, the man holding her so tenderly would become her worst nightmare. The wedding celebrations had been nothing short of spectacular. As the night drew to a close, Selina and Daxton bid farewell to their guests and slipped away into the limousine waiting for them. The cool night air carried the scent of roses and champagne as the car moved through the quiet streets, heading toward the luxurious hotel where they would spend their wedding night. Selina leaned against Daxton, her fingers laced with his, a soft smile playing on her lips. Exhaustion mixed with excitement, her heart still fluttering from the magical evening they had just shared. Upon arrival, hotel staff greeted them warmly, congratulating the newlyweds before escorting them to the honeymoon suite. The moment the doors swung open, Selina gasped in delight. The room was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Candlelight flickered against the walls, and a trail of rose petals led toward the massive canopy bed. A bottle of champagne chilled in a silver bucket beside a tray of decadent chocolates. It was the picture of romance, everything she had ever dreamed of. Selina stepped forward, running her fingers along the soft fabric of the bed, feeling the warmth of anticipation settle in her chest. Daxton followed behind her, silent, his expression unreadable. He had been quiet since they left the reception, his grip on her hand firm but not affectionate. She dismissed it as exhaustion from the long day. As the evening progressed, the air in the suite grew heavier. Selina noticed the way Daxton's posture had changed, tense, rigid, as if something weighed on his mind. His eyes, once filled with admiration, now seemed distant. She tried to shake off the creeping unease settling in her stomach. This was their first night together as husband and wife. She wanted it to be special, not overshadowed by nerves. When Daxton finally spoke, his tone was colder than she had expected. His once loving gaze hardened into something else, something darker. As he pressed her for details about her past, Selina felt her pulse quicken. The questions at first seemed harmless, but the intensity behind them sent a chill through her. She answered truthfully, but with each word, she could see his expression shift from curiosity to something more unsettling. Then came the realization that shattered the illusion of their perfect night. The moment he understood that she was not the untouched bride he had expected, something in him snapped. His face twisted with anger, disbelief clouding his features. His breathing grew uneven, his hands clenching at his sides. The warmth that had once filled his eyes was gone, replaced by something raw and terrifying. Selina stepped back instinctively, her heart pounding. She had never seen him like this before. The man she had just vowed to spend her life with now looked at her as if she had betrayed him in the worst possible way. The silence between them stretched, thick with tension. Every second that passed felt like the calm before a deadly storm. The wedding night that was supposed to be filled with love and passion had instead become a nightmare. The soft candlelight that once symbolized romance now flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows along the walls. The city lights outside continued to twinkle, oblivious to the horror unfolding within the room. The tension in the suite became unbearable. Selina's heart pounded against her chest as she took slow, cautious steps away from Daxton. The warmth of the room, once comforting, now felt suffocating. The walls seemed to close in around her, the candlelight flickering wildly as if sensing the storm about to erupt. She searched his face for a sign of understanding, a glimmer of the man she had married just hours ago, but all she saw was a cold, unreadable expression that sent a shiver down her spine. Daxton's breathing had grown heavy, his fists tightening at his sides. His mind raced, consumed by betrayal. He had built his entire life on discipline, control, and the firm belief that certain values were sacred. He had waited for this night, believing that his bride had done the same. The truth, her truth, was something he had never prepared himself for. It was a wound to his pride, an insult to his expectations. The woman he had held in such high regard was, in his mind, nothing more than a liar who had shattered the very foundation of their marriage before it had even begun. Selina tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She could feel the vibe shift in the air, a suffocating darkness creeping into the space between them. She had never imagined this moment unfolding like this. The man who had danced with her under twinkling lights mere hours ago now looked at her as though she were a stranger, an enemy. Then without warning, Daxton moved. His actions were swift, fueled by an anger so consuming that reason no longer had a place in his mind. The first blow came as a shock, a force so unexpected that Selina stumbled backward, her vision blurring for a moment. Pain exploded through her body, but there was no time to react. Another strike followed, then another, each one more brutal than the last. The suite, once a haven of romance, became a scene of horror. Glass shattered as furniture overturned, the sound of struggle filling the once serene room. Selina fought to catch her breath. her body growing weaker with each passing second. The strength she had once relied on seemed to drain from her limbs as she collapsed to the floor. The plush carpet beneath her felt rough against her bruised skin, the crimson stains spreading across it a stark contrast to the pristine white of her wedding gown. Daxton towered over her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. The rage that had consumed him had turned into something else, an emptiness, a hollow realization of what he had just done. The woman he had once admired, the woman he had vowed to love and cherish, now lay motionless before him. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the flickering of the dying candles around them. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, but it was too late to undo what had been done. The perfect wedding, the perfect bride, the perfect life, shattered in a single moment of uncontrollable fury. The night that was supposed to mark the beginning of forever had instead become the night that ended everything. The suite was deathly silent. The only sound that remained was the soft, uneven rhythm of Daxton's breathing as he stood over Selina's lifeless body. The weight of what he had done pressed down on him, thick and suffocating. The once pristine room was now in complete disarray, overturned furniture, broken glass, and deep red stains soaking into the plush white carpet. The scent of roses and expensive champagne had been overtaken by the metallic tang of blood. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows along the walls, as if mocking the horror that had unfolded. Daxton's hands trembled as he took a step back, his heart hammering against his ribcage. His mind raced, flipping between disbelief and cold, hard reality. He had lost control. He had allowed his rage to consume him, and now there was no turning back. The woman he had promised to cherish forever lay before him, motionless, her wedding gown ruined by the violence that had erupted in the heat of his fury. Panic crept in, cold and relentless. He needed to think. He needed to fix this. No one could know what had happened. The world outside was still oblivious, lost in the glow of celebration. Friends and family were likely still awake, reminiscing about the wedding, believing the couple was spending their first night together in bliss. The idea that anyone might suspect the truth sent a jolt of fear through him. His mind shifted into survival mode. He couldn't stay in the room like this. The evidence of his crime was everywhere, and the longer he stood there, the more real it became. He needed to clean up, to cover his tracks. Rushing to the bathroom, he turned on the sink, splashing cold water onto his face, trying to calm his nerves. His reflection stared back at him, but he barely recognized himself. His jaw was tight, his eyes wide with panic. He was not the composed, controlled man he had always prided himself on being. He was something else now. He grabbed a towel and knelt beside Selina's still body, pressing it against the deepest wound, as if that could somehow undo the damage, but it was useless. The warmth was already leaving her skin, and reality was sinking its claws deeper into him. He needed to get rid of the body. He glanced toward the suite's balcony, his mind calculating the possibilities. They were on one of the upper floors, overlooking the dimly lit streets below. No one would suspect anything if they saw movement. Just another hotel guest stepping out for fresh air. His pulse quickened as an idea formed. If he could dispose of her body without anyone seeing, maybe he could create a story, an alibi, something that would shift suspicion away from him. But time was slipping away. He had to act fast before someone, housekeeping, a staff member, anyone, came knocking on the door. He had covered his tracks before in business, hiding inconvenient truths, silencing problems. Now, he had to do the same with his wife. Daxton moved with a frantic energy, his mind racing through every possible way to rid himself of the evidence. His hands, still trembling, gripped Selina's limp body as he dragged her toward the balcony. The heavy weight of her lifeless form resisted him, her once graceful figure now nothing more than a burden he desperately needed to discard. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he pulled her closer to the glass doors, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The night outside was still and quiet. The city stretched below him, glowing with streetlights and the occasional headlights of passing cars. No one was looking up. No one suspected a thing. His heart pounded violently in his chest as he slid the balcony door open, the cool night, air rushing in and brushing against his damp skin. He peered over the edge, calculating the distance. A fall from this height would be fatal. She was already gone, but this would ensure no one questioned it. He hesitated for a split second, gripping the railing tightly. His mind screamed at him to stop, to think, to find another way. But fear was louder. He had already gone too far. There was no fixing this. With one last deep breath, he heaved her over the edge. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The white fabric of her ruined gown fluttered like a ghostly shadow before she disappeared into the darkness below. The impact never reached his ears, but he knew it had happened. He stepped back quickly, his chest rising and falling with shallow, panicked breaths. He rushed inside, his eyes darting across the wreckage of the suite. Blood smeared across the carpet. Shattered glass glittered on the floor, and overturned furniture made the once luxurious space look like a crime scene. He needed to clean, to erase any sign of what had taken place. He grabbed towels, wiping surfaces, scrubbing desperately at the stains that refused to disappear. Every second felt like an hour, his mind buzzing with paranoia. Had anyone heard anything? Would someone come knocking at the door? Then, a knock. His entire body stiffened. His heart slammed against his ribs as he turned toward the door, his breath catching in his throat. Another knock, this time firmer. His pulse roared in his ears. "Mr. Calloway." The voice was muffled, but he recognized it as a hotel staff member. "We received a noise complaint. Is everything all right?" Daxton swallowed hard, forcing himself to steady his voice. He couldn't let them in. He couldn't let them see the chaos inside. He approached the door slowly, wiping his bloodied hands against his pants before gripping the handle. "Yes, everything is fine." His voice came out controlled, but the weight of his crime pressed against him like a vice. "All right, sir. Let us know if you need anything." He waited until the sound of footsteps faded before exhaling sharply. But just as relief began to wash over him, a new sound rose from below, the distant wail of sirens growing louder with every second.